The hospital corridors were quiet that evening. Most of the patients were resting, and the soft hum of medical machines filled the background like a gentle lullaby. The nurse walked briskly, her shoes squeaking lightly on the polished floor. She had spent the entire day attending to patients, checking vital signs, administering medications, and calming frightened children. Her uniform, simple and practical, carried the faint scent of antiseptic and hard work. Her hands, though tired, were steady and gentle, a testament to years of caring for others without asking for anything in return. Tonight was unusual. The hospital administration had sent out invitations to a charity gala organized at one of the city's most luxurious hotels. The event was to honor frontline workers, a gesture meant to appreciate their tireless efforts. For the nurse, it was both exciting and nerve-wracking. She had never been to such a place. She had always seen the world of wealth and luxury only from the outside through the tall gates of fancy neighborhoods or the glimmering windows of high-end stores. She often wondered what it would feel like to be in such a world. But she never imagined she would actually attend an event among millionaires and celebrities. As she stepped out of the hospital, the cool evening air greeted her. She adjusted the small bag she carried over her shoulder, filled with just a few essentials. Her uniform had been replaced with a modest but elegant dress her mother had gifted her for special occasions. She had spent time carefully tying her hair back, trying to present herself neatly, but without losing her simplicity. She didn't want to appear flashy or show off. She only wanted to belong, even if just for a few hours, and honor the invitation extended to her. Arriving at the hotel, she was struck by its grandeur. Marble floors reflected the chandeliers above, and the golden accents on the walls shimmered softly in the light. A string quartet played gentle music near the entrance, and the scent of fresh flowers and gourmet food filled the air. Guests in designer dresses and sharp suits mingled with champagne glasses in hand, exchanging polite smiles and practiced laughter. She paused for a moment, taking it all in, feeling a mix of awe and anxiety. For a brief second, she wondered if she truly belonged here. She reminded herself that she had been invited because of her dedication and hard work. She had earned this place just like anyone else. As she made her way further inside, she noticed groups forming around tables with elaborate decorations. Waiters moved gracefully between the guests, carrying trays of delicacies. She found a quiet corner and stood there, observing the room. She was polite and smiled whenever someone glanced her way, but mostly she tried to stay out of the spotlight. Her mind wandered back to the patients she had attended to that day, the little boy recovering from surgery, the elderly woman who had needed reassurance about her medication, the anxious mother who had been comforted by a simple conversation. She thought about how different this world was from the hospital, yet how connected it felt in its own way. Tonight she was being celebrated, not for wealth or status, but for her kindness, her skill, and her dedication. It wasn't long before she noticed him, the millionaire. He was a tall man, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed to be made of the finest fabric money could buy. There was an air of confidence about him, or perhaps arrogance, that made him stand out even in this crowd of influential people. He moved through the room with a commanding presence, shaking hands and offering compliments that seemed rehearsed rather than sincere. He had a sharp gaze, one that could size up a person in a single glance. When his eyes landed on the nurse, she felt an immediate tension, though she tried to maintain her calm. He walked over to her, and the nurse straightened her back, trying not to appear intimidated. His smile was polite but carried a hint of mockery. "Ah, you're one of the nurses, I see," he said, his voice loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear. "Quite unusual for someone like you to be here, don't you think?" His words were coated with condescension. The nurse felt a pang of discomfort but replied softly and respectfully, "I was invited along with other hospital staff to celebrate our work." "I'm honored to be here." The millionaire's smirk widened, and he chuckled in a way that made the nurse's cheeks warm. "Well, I suppose you do have your place in this room, even if it is a small one," he said, looking around the crowd as if to invite their judgment. A few guests glanced her way, curious about the exchange. The nurse kept her composure. She had faced stressful situations in the hospital every day, moments when her patience and calm were tested to the limit. This, she reminded herself, was just another challenge, a test of dignity rather than medical skill. She tried to move away gracefully, letting the conversation end, but the millionaire continued, addressing a few others nearby with a boastful tone. He spoke about his investments, his travels, and the luxury cars he owned, all the while implying that someone like her would never understand such a life. The nurse listened politely, nodding occasionally, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about her family, her dreams, and the quiet moments of satisfaction she felt after helping someone recover or simply offering comfort. Money and status were not what defined her worth. She had learned long ago that dignity came from one's actions, not from wealth. As she scanned the room, she noticed the host approaching the guests with a microphone. "Tonight we want to celebrate not just our donors, but everyone with a talent, a story, or a gift that can touch our hearts," the host announced. "If anyone would like to perform or share something special, please feel free to come forward. Let's make this night unforgettable." A few people hesitated, then some stepped forward to showcase their skills singing, storytelling, and short speeches about their experiences. The nurse watched quietly, unsure if she could or should participate. She had a skill, yes, but it had been private for years, tucked away behind the walls of her home in childhood. Memories. The millionaire noticed the hesitant glance she cast toward the stage. He raised an eyebrow and said loud enough for her to hear, "I don't think she has any talent worth showing, do you?" His tone carried mockery, and a few guests nearby chuckled politely. The nurse felt a mix of embarrassment and irritation, but reminded herself to stay calm. She had faced criticism, condescension, and doubt many times in her life, and she had learned to let her actions speak louder than words. Something inside her stirred. She remembered the piano at her home, a slightly old instrument that had been silent for years. As a child, she had spent hours playing, losing herself in the music, expressing emotions she couldn't put into words. Life had pulled her away from it with responsibilities, work, and sacrifices. But now, standing in this grand room, a thought took hold: why not share a piece of herself? She didn't need approval from anyone, and she certainly didn't need to prove herself to someone who thought so little of her. She took a deep breath, feeling a calm determination wash over her. She would go to the stage, yes, and she would play the piano, not to humiliate or confront anyone, but simply because it was a part of who she was. With a gentle smile, she made her way through the crowd, each step steady, even though her heart beat faster with nerves. The guests turned to watch as she approached the grand piano. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few offered encouraging nods. The millionaire's smirk lingered. Clearly expecting her to fail or embarrass herself, she reached the piano and paused for a moment, placing her hands lightly on the keys. The room grew quieter, as if sensing the tension and the anticipation. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering the countless hours she had spent at the piano as a child, the emotions she had poured into each note, the dreams she had nurtured in silence. Then, with a soft exhale, she began to play. The first notes floated gently across the room, delicate and precise, yet full of emotion. The nurse's fingers hovered over the piano keys for a brief moment, and a hush fell over the room. It was as if the air itself had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. The millionaire, standing nearby, leaned slightly forward, his smirk still in place, clearly anticipating a laugh or a stumble. He had expected a short, awkward attempt, something that would confirm his assumption that a nurse from a modest background had no place among the elite. The nurse, however, did not flinch. She had been underestimated her entire life, and she had grown used to it. This time, she would let her actions speak louder than words. When she pressed the first note, it was soft, delicate, almost shy. The sound filled the vast room, traveling through the golden chandeliers, brushing against the walls, and floating across the faces of the guests. At first, some people glanced at each other in surprise. The music was unexpected, gentle, but there was a clear skill and precision that could not be ignored. The nurse continued, her fingers dancing across the keys with a fluidity that only came from years of practice and deep emotional connection. Every note carried a story, a piece of her life that had been hidden away for far too long. The millionaire's expression began to shift very slowly. His confident smirk wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He leaned slightly to one side, as if trying to see a trick behind her hands. He had expected clumsiness, but instead the music was polished, heartfelt, and hauntingly beautiful. His words, which had been so sharp and dismissive just moments ago, now seemed hollow in comparison to the melody floating through the room. Some guests had begun to lean closer, eyes widening in astonishment. They had seen many performances at similar events, but there was something different about this. The music wasn't just about technical skill. It was about emotion, experience, and authenticity. There was no pretense, no showmanship, just pure, heartfelt expression. Every note seemed to tell a story of hard work, struggle, and quiet triumph. A few older guests whispered to each other, their voices soft, unsure if anyone else could hear. They spoke of the skill, the passion, and the depth that seemed far beyond the nurse's years. The nurse's heart raced, but not from fear. She was focused entirely on the music, letting it guide her hands and voice through the piano. She remembered the hours she had spent as a child sitting on the piano bench at home, her mother watching silently as she poured her emotions into the keys. Back then, the piano had been a private world, a place where she could escape from responsibilities, worries, and the harsh realities of life. She had given it up to focus on school, family, and eventually her career in nursing. But the skills had never left her. Tonight, they returned naturally. With a force and clarity that surprised even her as she played, the room became utterly still. Guests who had been chatting or moving about now paused, transfixed. The delicate melody swirled around them, a soft wave that carried both sorrow and hope. Some closed their eyes, moved by the music, while others simply stood frozen, unsure how to respond. It was impossible not to feel the emotion contained within each note. Even the millionaire, who had once mocked her presence, could not look away. His eyes darted around the room, meeting the expressions of other guests, noticing their astonishment and growing admiration. Slowly, the reality began to sink in. The nurse was not just competent. She was extraordinary. It was clear that this was not merely a performance for the sake of applause. It was a personal statement, a reminder that appearances and social status meant nothing compared to skill, heart, and dedication. The nurse's fingers moved faster now, more confidently, exploring the full range of the piano, building layers of emotion that captured everyone's attention. The guests began to whisper among themselves, praising her talent quietly at first, then more audibly as they felt the need to acknowledge what they were witnessing. The music was captivating, and it commanded respect without demanding it. The millionaire's arrogance began to crumble. He shifted from foot to foot, his smirk gone, replaced by a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a touch of embarrassment. He had underestimated her, assumed that wealth and class automatically granted superiority, and now he was confronted with undeniable proof of her skill and inner strength. He glanced around, noticing the way other guests were leaning in, whispering praise, and recording the moment on their phones. For the first time that evening, he felt unsure of himself, a sensation he was not used to. As the nurse continued, the music grew more complex, weaving together delicate arpeggios and powerful chords. She played with precision, but also with freedom, allowing her emotions to shape the sound. She wasn't playing for recognition or reward, she was playing for herself, for the moments of her life that had been shaped by care, sacrifice, and resilience. Every patient she had helped, every long night she had endured, every challenge she had overcome seemed to pour into the music. Guests began to feel the depth of her experiences, even without knowing her story. The room felt suspended in time, caught in the spell of her performance. A few of the younger guests whispered excitedly to each other. "Did you see her hands?" "She's amazing," one said. Another nodded. "I can't believe she's a nurse." This level of talent is incredible. The comments spread quietly like ripples through the room, building a collective recognition of her skill. She didn't need anyone to announce her worth. Her music was already doing it. The nurse noticed a few faces in the crowd that had once looked at her with skepticism. Their expressions softened as they realized they had misjudged her. She smiled faintly, though her focus never wavered from the piano. This wasn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It was about showing her true self and letting the truth speak for itself. The millionaire, now visibly uneasy, tried to hide his reaction, but the change in the room's energy was undeniable. He had mocked her presence, thinking she was out of place. But now the spotlight was on her talent, and the room was captivated. As the performance reached its crescendo, the nurse's hands moved with remarkable speed and accuracy, producing a sequence of notes that were both powerful and emotive. The melody rose, filling every corner of the room, reaching into the hearts of everyone present. Some guests were moved to tears, others were smiling in awe, and a few simply held their breath, afraid to break the fragile magic of the moment. Even the millionaire found himself silent, unable to interrupt the spell that had been cast by someone he had underestimated so easily. Finally, the nurse brought the piece to a gentle close. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, and the room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if no one could quite believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the first claps rang out. One by one, the applause grew louder, until the entire room was clapping, cheering, and whistling in appreciation. The sound of admiration was overwhelming, a wave of recognition that washed over her in the most unexpected and beautiful way. The nurse allowed herself a small, humble smile, grateful that she had shared this part of herself. The millionaire looked around, clearly flustered, unsure where to direct his attention. He had been the center of attention before, confident in his status and wealth, but now he was a spectator to someone else's brilliance. He cleared his throat awkwardly, attempting to muster a compliment, but it fell flat compared to the genuine admiration from the crowd. He had underestimated her, and the lesson was undeniable. Talent, courage, and heart could never be measured by money or social class. Some guests approached the nurse, offering praise, compliments, and questions about her musical background. They were curious, inspired, and genuinely touched by her story. She answered politely, sharing bits about her childhood, the time she had spent learning piano, and how life had led her down a different path. Her humility, combined with her remarkable skill, left a lasting impression. People began to see her not just as a nurse, but as a person with a depth of talent and resilience that transcended social expectations. As the applause continued, the nurse realized something important. She had not sought to humiliate anyone, nor had she intended to confront the millionaire. She had simply been herself, and that alone had commanded respect. The room had witnessed a quiet triumph, not of wealth over talent, or status over skill, but of authenticity, courage, and the quiet power of doing what one loves with sincerity. The applause gradually faded, leaving the room filled with an almost tangible sense of awe. The nurse lowered her hands from the piano keys, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. Her heart was still racing from the performance, but it was not fear or nervousness, it was exhilaration, a mixture of relief and quiet pride. She had stepped onto the stage with nothing but her own courage and talent, and now the room was filled with admiration and respect. For the first time that evening, she truly felt seen. Not for her uniform or her social status, but for who she was and what she could create. The millionaire, who had moments ago been the loudest voice of mockery, now looked around uncertainly. His confident posture had shifted into something more restrained, almost defensive. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out immediately. He had underestimated her, and the reality was sinking in slowly. He was not used to being confronted with someone's genuine skill, especially not from someone he had assumed was beneath him socially. Around him, guests whispered and smiled, some exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their surprise and admiration. The nurse remained calm, stepping away from the piano with a humble smile. She was aware of the attention she was receiving, but she did not let it overwhelm her. Her focus was on the moment itself, the feeling of having shared a part of her soul through music. She had not performed to win accolades or to silence her critics. She had done it because it was part of who she was. And yet, witnessing the way the room had changed, the way people's perceptions had shifted, she felt a quiet sense of validation. Several guests approached her immediately, eager to express their appreciation. "That was incredible," one woman said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. I've never heard anything so moving. You must have practiced for years. The nurse shook her head gently, replying, "Thank you. I used to play a lot when I was younger. Life took me in a different direction, but I've always loved music." Another guest, an older man with kind eyes, said, "Your performance reminded all of us that true talent and passion don't come from money or status. You've touched everyone here tonight." The nurse felt warmth in her chest at these words. She had never sought recognition, yet here she was, being celebrated simply for sharing a part of herself. She realized that the value of her talent wasn't in how much applause she received, but in how it could inspire, move, and connect with others. For her, music had always been a private escape, a personal refuge from life's struggles. Sharing it now, in front of a room full of strangers, felt both terrifying and liberating. She had discovered a new form of courage, one that didn't come from physical strength or endurance, but from honesty and vulnerability. Meanwhile, the millionaire's discomfort grew. He had expected a brief, unimpressive performance that would confirm his assumptions, but what he had witnessed was far beyond that. The room had shifted. The energy had changed. People were no longer focused on social hierarchies or appearances, they were absorbed in the nurse's talent. He realized that his attempts to assert superiority through wealth and status were meaningless in the face of genuine skill and authenticity. He tried to reclaim the conversation, speaking a few words of praise, but his voice lacked conviction. Guests turned to him with polite smiles, clearly not sharing his earlier arrogance. The nurse noticed his awkward attempt at conversation but chose not to respond directly. She had no need to. Her performance had spoken louder than any words could. She moved gracefully toward the edge of the stage, acknowledging the applause with a simple nod. Some younger guests, inspired by her courage, whispered among themselves. "She didn't just play beautifully," one said. "She taught everyone a lesson about humility and respect." Another added, "It's amazing how she remained calm and composed the entire time." That's real strength. Her mind wandered briefly to her life before this moment. She remembered the long nights at the hospital, the exhaustion, the moments of doubt when she wondered if her hard work truly mattered. She thought of the patients she had cared for, the elderly woman who had been afraid of surgery, the child who had cried at the sight of a hospital gown, the parents who had leaned on her for reassurance. Those experiences had shaped her, given her resilience and empathy. They had also prepared her for this moment, teaching her patience, composure, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth is not determined by others. The nurse then noticed a few children in the crowd, accompanied by their parents, watching her with wide eyes. Their curiosity and amazement reminded her of herself as a child, sitting in front of the piano, imagining a world beyond her home and family. She smiled softly, thinking about the power of inspiration and how simple acts, like sharing one's talent, could ripple far beyond what anyone might expect. She realized that her performance was not just about impressing the room. It was about showing others, especially young people, that dreams and passions are never too small or too hidden to be shared. Gradually, the atmosphere of the room shifted further. Guests who had previously been focused on social status and appearances were now engaged in conversations about her performance. Many wanted to know more about her life, her music, and her experiences as a nurse. They asked questions respectfully, eager to learn about someone whose authenticity had clearly left a mark. The nurse answered politely, sharing pieces of her story with humility, never seeking to boast. She explained that she had once dreamed of becoming a professional musician, but had chosen nursing to support her family. Her explanation resonated with many, highlighting the sacrifices people make quietly, often without recognition. The millionaire, observing all of this, began to feel a quiet sense of unease. He had assumed that wealth and confidence could overshadow talent, but he was confronted with the reality that genuine skill and authenticity carried a power that money could never buy. He shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his earlier attempts to assert superiority were not only ineffective but had made him appear petty in comparison. Guests no longer focused on him. Their attention had shifted entirely to the nurse, whose humility and talent now commanded respect. As the nurse walked down from the stage, she felt a subtle change in herself. The fear and nervousness she had felt when entering the room had transformed into quiet empowerment. She had faced judgment, mockery, and doubt, yet she had remained composed and true to herself. Her performance had not only revealed her talent, but also demonstrated the strength of character that comes from perseverance, empathy, and self-belief. She realized that moments like these, where one's abilities are tested and recognized, carry a lasting impact far beyond the immediate applause. A few guests approached her with genuine curiosity. One asked, "Do you still play often?" She shook her head gently. "Not as much as I'd like. Life is busy and my responsibilities as a nurse come first. But music has always been a part of me. It's a way to express what words cannot." Another guest said, "You should consider performing professionally. People would be amazed to see your talent." She smiled softly, replying, "Thank you, but my life is here, helping others. Music is my gift, not necessarily my career." The sincerity in her voice made a profound impression, reinforcing the idea that fulfillment comes from passion, not recognition or fame. Meanwhile, the millionaire tried once more to interject. "I suppose I should say, well, you were impressive," he said, his words hesitant and lacking confidence. He avoided eye contact, clearly aware of how the room's attention had shifted. The nurse nodded politely but did not engage further. She had no need to prove anything to him. Her talent, her composure, and her courage had already spoken for themselves. She understood that true respect cannot be demanded. It is earned through consistent actions and authenticity. As the evening continued, guests continued to talk about the performance. Many shared their admiration quietly with each other, while some discreetly recorded short clips on their phones to remember the moment. It became clear that the nurse's presence had transformed the event in subtle but meaningful ways. She had reminded everyone, from the wealthiest guest to the quiet observer in the corner, that true worth is measured not by status or possessions, but by skill, heart, and the courage to remain true to oneself. The nurse felt a sense of calm satisfaction as she moved back toward the refreshment table. Her heart was still beating from the intensity of the performance, but her mind was clear. She realized that the moment was not just about music, it was about resilience, dignity, and the quiet power of staying true to one's values. She had faced judgment, doubt, and mockery, yet she had remained herself. That alone, she knew, was an achievement worth celebrating. The nurse returned to the piano, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys as she prepared for the next piece. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt, only a calm focus that radiated from her. The room had grown quiet again, the guests sensing that something remarkable was about to happen. Their curiosity mingled with anticipation, a subtle tension filling the air. Even the millionaire, who had been smug and dismissive earlier, now stood still, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of disbelief and unease. He had underestimated her once. He was determined not to be caught off guard again. Though he had no idea what to expect, she began playing, and the music was different this time. It was bold, confident, and filled with emotion. Each note carried a story, her struggles, her triumphs, the countless nights she had spent caring for others, often sacrificing her own comfort and time. The melody was powerful yet delicate, weaving a tapestry of sound that captured everyone's attention immediately. Guests who had been whispering moments ago fell silent, listening intently. Even the waiters paused, holding trays in mid-air, captivated by the unexpected depth and richness of her performance. The millionaire shifted uncomfortably. His confident posture faltered, replaced by tension. He had assumed that wealth and social standing could overshadow talent, but now he faced undeniable proof that true skill and heart cannot be bought or faked. The music was commanding, moving, and impossible to ignore. He glanced around, noticing the expressions of other guests' wide eyes, open mouths, even tears on some cheeks. There was a collective awe in the room, a shared recognition that something extraordinary was unfolding right before them. The nurse's hands moved faster now, her fingers flying across the keys with precision and grace. She had not practiced this performance for anyone. It was natural, instinctive, and full of emotion. Each chord built on the previous one, creating layers of sound that filled the space and seemed to touch the hearts of everyone present. The guests could feel the intensity, the passion, and the story behind every note. The room was no longer just a gathering of people. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection that transcended social status, wealth, or background. Some guests whispered to each other, unable to contain their amazement. "I can't believe she's a nurse," one said quietly. "Her talent is incredible." Another nodded, adding, "It's not just her skill, it's the way she plays. You can feel her life experiences in the music." The nurse continued without noticing the whispers. She was fully absorbed in the performance, letting her emotions guide her hands and her mind. Each note was deliberate, expressive, and full of meaning. The millionaire tried to regain his composure, straightening his shoulders and attempting to smile, but it felt forced. He had expected to be the center of attention, to dominate the room with his presence, but now the focus was entirely on her. Every guest, from the wealthiest to the quietest observer, was captivated. His previous arrogance had no place here. It was replaced by a growing sense of discomfort and realization. For the first time in a long while, he felt powerless in the face of genuine talent. As the performance progressed, the nurse's music grew even more dynamic. She played with a mixture of intensity and softness, alternating between powerful chords that resonated through the room and delicate passages that required quiet attention. The contrast was breathtaking, showcasing not only technical mastery but also emotional depth. Guests leaned forward, some with tears in their eyes as they felt the weight and beauty of the music. The nurse's performance was no longer just impressive, it was transformative. It had the power to move, inspire, and leave a lasting impression on everyone present. A few young guests whispered among themselves, clearly inspired. "She's amazing," one said. "I want to learn the piano like her someday." Another added, "It's not just her playing, it's how she tells a story through music. That's something special." Their words reflected a broader truth. Talent combined with authenticity can create a ripple effect, inspiring others in ways that go beyond simple admiration. The nurse's performance was not just entertainment. It was a lesson in courage, perseverance, and self-expression. The nurse felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she played. The applause and admiration were meaningful, but what mattered most was the connection she was creating with the audience. Each note was a bridge between her world and theirs, a reminder that genuine talent and heart cannot be confined by social class, wealth, or expectations. The music carried her story of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet determination, and the room responded with an unspoken acknowledgement of her journey. The millionaire's unease grew with every passing moment. He had believed that status, money, and arrogance could command respect, but he now realized that those things meant nothing when faced with true skill and authenticity. He watched as other guests whispered and nodded, some openly expressing their admiration. He attempted a few words of praise, but they fell flat compared to the overwhelming reaction from the crowd. For the first time, he understood that respect must be earned, and it could never be demanded or bought. The nurse, noticing the shift in the room, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had not intended to humiliate anyone, nor did she seek revenge for the earlier mockery. Her goal had always been to share her gift, and in doing so, she had revealed a truth that could not be ignored. Talent, humility, and perseverance are more powerful than arrogance or wealth. The room's reaction was proof that authenticity and skill resonate more deeply than status or appearance ever could. As the performance reached its peak, the nurse's hands moved with remarkable speed and precision, creating a series of cascading notes that filled the room with energy and emotion. The crescendo was breathtaking, drawing gasps and applause from the audience even before the final note. Some guests covered their mouths in awe, unable to contain their astonishment. Others clapped along spontaneously, swept up in the emotional intensity of the music. The energy in the room was electric, a shared moment of wonder that left everyone momentarily speechless. Finally, the nurse brought the piece to a gentle close. Her fingers lingered on the keys for a moment, allowing the final notes to resonate fully before resting her hands. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, the applause began, soft at first, then growing louder. until the entire room erupted in cheers, whistles, and clapping. The standing ovation was heartfelt and overwhelming. Guests who had initially doubted her presence now recognized her extraordinary talent, and many were moved to tears by the emotional impact of her performance. The millionaire looked around, clearly stunned. His previous arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a mixture of humility, shock, and respect. He realized that his attempts to belittle her had failed spectacularly. The audience had witnessed her talent, her courage, and her authenticity, and there was no denying the impact she had made. He tried to approach her with a compliment, but it felt awkward and forced compared to the genuine admiration coming from the rest of the room. The nurse allowed herself a small, humble smile as she stood. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a deep inner peace. She had faced judgment and mockery, yet she had remained true to herself. Her performance had spoken louder than any words could, and the respect she had earned was genuine and well-deserved. She knew that she did not need to prove anything further. Her music had already done that for her. Guests approached her, offering congratulations, asking questions about her musical background, and expressing how deeply moved they were. She shared bits of her story with humility, explaining how she had loved music since childhood but had chosen nursing to support her family. Her words resonated with many, highlighting the sacrifices and quiet dedication that often go unnoticed in everyday life. The nurse's story, combined with her extraordinary talent, left a lasting impression on everyone present, reminding them of the power of perseverance, authenticity, and self-belief. As the applause continued, the nurse realized something profound. True recognition does not come from wealth, social status, or external validation. It comes from embracing one's gifts, sharing them sincerely, and remaining true to oneself. In that moment, she understood that her performance was more than just music. It was a declaration of self-worth, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from living authentically. The applause slowly faded, but the energy in the room remained electric. Guests who had been quiet moments ago now spoke animatedly among themselves, discussing the nurse's performance, expressing their admiration, and reflecting on how unexpectedly powerful it had been. Some clutched their hands over their mouths in disbelief, others wiped away tears, and a few whispered to friends and colleagues about how extraordinary it was that someone so humble could possess such immense talent. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The nurse, standing near the piano, felt a mixture of humility and quiet pride. She had shared her gift, and the room had responded in a way she had never imagined. The millionaire, who had tried to belittle her earlier, now looked unsettled. He had spent the evening carrying an air of superiority, confident that his wealth and social status would dominate the room. But her performance had changed everything. His smirk had disappeared, replaced by a frown and a tension he did not know how to release. He looked around, noticing the way other guests were smiling at her, recording short videos, and openly praising her skill. There was no room left for his arrogance. Her music had claimed the attention and respect that he had once assumed was his by default. Finally, gathering a small measure of courage, he approached her. "That was quite impressive," he said, his voice stiff and hesitant. I didn't expect that." The nurse looked at him with calm eyes, her expression neutral yet kind. She nodded politely, saying simply, "Thank you." She could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken acknowledgement, that she had exceeded every expectation and that no words of belittlement could undo the impact of her talent. She did not need to confront him further. Her music had already spoken the truth. Other guests, noticing the exchange, smiled politely at the millionaire, but did not linger on his awkwardness. Their attention remained on the nurse, whose humility and talent had captured their admiration. Some approached her to ask about her background and how she had learned to play piano so beautifully. She shared pieces of her story with warmth and modesty. "I used to play a lot when I was younger," she explained. "Life led me to nursing, and I devoted myself to helping others. Music was always part of me, even if I didn't play in public for many years. Tonight, I just wanted to share it." Her words resonated deeply with the guests. They could see the dedication, the sacrifice, and the resilience that had shaped her life. Many remarked on how rare it was to meet someone who carried such talent, skill, and humility all at once. A few young guests whispered to each other about how inspiring it was to see someone remain true to themselves despite obstacles and societal expectations. It became clear that her performance had done more than entertain. It had left a lasting impression, inspiring and reminding everyone in the room about the value of perseverance, authenticity, and heart. As the evening progressed, the nurse found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Some offered heartfelt compliments, while others expressed curiosity about her life and experiences. She shared small, personal detail stories about her patients, the long nights at the hospital, and the satisfaction she found in caring for others. Guests listened intently, recognizing that her music was only one aspect of a remarkable individual who balanced talent with empathy, courage, and humility. Her presence in the room was no longer defined by social status, wealth, or background. It was defined by who she truly was. The millionaire, observing all of this, felt an unusual sense of introspection. He had often relied on money, power, and status to influence people and assert control. Tonight he realized none of that mattered. He had assumed that someone like her could be easily dismissed, but her talent and composure had spoken for themselves, leaving him confronted with the reality that true worth cannot be measured by wealth. His earlier attempts at mockery and condescension seemed petty in comparison to the impact she had made. He shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the lessons of humility, respect, and authenticity unfolding before him. The nurse noticed that some of the guests were whispering about her courage, the way she had faced judgment with calmness, and how she had remained dignified despite mockery. It reminded her that every challenge she had faced in life, from long, exhausting hospital shifts to moments of doubt about her abilities, had prepared her for this moment. Her experiences had taught her patience, resilience, and confidence. She had learned that self-respect and quiet determination mattered far more than appearances or approval from those who sought to belittle others. A few guests were visibly emotional, telling her how much they were inspired by her performance. One older woman said, "You reminded us all that true talent and heart can't be measured by social status. Thank you for sharing yourself with us." The nurse smiled, her eyes softening. She responded gently, "I'm grateful to have had the chance. Music has always been part of me, and I'm happy it could touch others tonight." She realized that the impact of her actions extended far beyond the applause. It was in the inspiration she provided and the example she set of grace, courage, and authenticity. Some guests recorded short videos, eager to share the performance with friends and family, while others quietly reflected on the evening. They recognized that the nurse had achieved something rare. She had commanded respect, admiration, and attention without seeking it, using only her talent, humility, and dedication. In doing so, she had reminded everyone present that the most powerful qualities are not bought or flaunted. They are cultivated through persistence, care, and genuine passion. The millionaire, finally realizing the weight of the moment, attempted once more to acknowledge her talent. I suppose I should say, "Well, you were amazing," he said, his voice hesitant. There was no arrogance left in it, only an awkward attempt at recognition. The nurse accepted the comment with a polite nod. She didn't need to say more. Her performance, her demeanor, and the respect she had earned from the crowd spoke louder than any words could. She understood that true respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned through skill, courage, and authenticity. As the evening wound down, the nurse stepped away from the piano and began moving toward the exit. Guests continued to approach her, offering congratulations, asking questions, and expressing how moved they had been. She interacted with everyone graciously, showing humility and warmth. Her experience that evening was not just about personal triumph. It was about the ripple effect of inspiration, proving that courage, skill, and authenticity can leave lasting impressions on others. She glanced back at the stage one last time, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. The room, which had once felt intimidating and filled with judgment, had transformed into a space of admiration, connection, and shared appreciation. Her actions had reminded everyone present that dignity, talent, and heart are far more important than wealth, status, or appearances. She had faced condescension and judgment with grace, and in doing so, she had earned something far more meaningful than applause, respect, recognition, and the validation of being true to oneself. The nurse stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the gala fading behind her. She felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. For years, she had devoted herself to caring for others, often putting her own dreams aside. Tonight, she had reclaimed a piece of herself, sharing her music with the world and receiving recognition for her talent and courage. She knew that she had not only impressed the room, but she had also reminded herself of her own worth. True fulfillment, she realized, comes not from approval, wealth, or status, but from embracing one's gifts, living authentically, and sharing them with others. The nurse walked home slowly, her steps light despite the long day. The experience had reaffirmed her belief that perseverance, humility, and courage are the qualities that truly define a person. She had faced mockery, doubt, and social hierarchies, yet she had remained true to herself and let her talent shine. In doing so, she had inspired everyone who witnessed her performance and reminded them of the value of authenticity and heart. Her story, though personal and quiet, carried a powerful message that talent and dignity cannot be measured by social class or wealth, and that authenticity, courage, and skill always command respect. She had shown the world and perhaps even herself that standing tall, embracing one's abilities, and remaining humble in the face of adversity is the true path to recognition and fulfillment. As she continued walking, she felt a sense of quiet pride, knowing that she had achieved something extraordinary, not by competing or proving herself, but by being herself.